All eyes were on Donald Trump, as always. But this time, something shifted. Just for a second, the focus turned to a young man standing before him, tension in the air like the pause before a storm. Something unscripted was about to happen. Before we jump in, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Which state? Which city? We love connecting with our viewers. The event was held at a historic monument, a place steeped in legacy. The sun, usually bold, hid behind a veil of clouds. Flags lined the stage, microphones were perfectly placed, and only select guests, officials, media, and staff, stood by. Trump, in his classic suit and red tie, had just finished speaking when Trump's voice still lingered in the open air. He had spoken about strength, about America, and the future he envisioned, delivering the kind of speech everyone expected, full of polished confidence. Next to the podium stood a simple chair, and beside it a young man waited, not seated, not moving, just poised. He was tall, dressed in a plain dark suit, unfamiliar to most. No politician, no celebrity, just someone unexpected. Trump had introduced him briefly, almost casually, a nod to the next generation, the kind of line that earns polite applause before the spotlight moves on. But when the young man stepped toward the mic, the energy shifted. The crowd grew still. Something was different. Something about the moment felt different. The young man cleared his throat, a small sound but sharp in the sudden silence. His hands, loosely clasped, trembled just slightly, barely noticeable unless you were really watching. But the cameras were zoomed in and unblinking, catching every detail. Trump stood beside him, towering with that familiar expression, confident, slightly impatient, expecting everything to go exactly as planned. Maybe he thought the young man would offer some polite praise, say a few respectful words, thank him for the opportunity and keep it simple. But when the young man finally spoke, his voice was quiet, a little unsteady. "Thank you, Mr. President," he said, locking eyes with Trump. "Thank you for this opportunity to be here." He paused, and the slight tremble in his hands grew more noticeable. Trump gave a small nod, a subtle, impatient signal to move along. "I've been thinking a lot lately," the young man continued, his voice a bit steadier now, "about truth, about what it really means to be honest, especially when it's hard." That wasn't in the script. You could see it on the faces around Trump, staff exchanging uneasy glances, the press shifting forward, sensing something real unfolding. Even Trump, always composed, seemed to tense ever so slightly. His smile froze, tight at the corners. The young man looked out over the crowd, the flags, the monument behind them. "We talk a lot about greatness," he said, "about winning, about building." He turned back to Trump. "But I think sometimes we forget that real strength isn't just about power or success." The air seemed colder. The hum of cameras buzzed louder, like static charged with tension. Trump's expression changed, no longer just polite but sharp, calculating. The young man held his gaze and said, "It's about facing the truth." The young man spoke, his voice now steady and unwavering, carrying clearly through the open air. "Even when the truth is uncomfortable," he said, "even when it means admitting mistakes or acknowledging things we wish weren't true." He paused, and the silence that followed was electric. You could hear a pin drop. Reporters typed frantically, camera lenses locked in on the two figures. "There have been things said," he continued, eyes fixed on Trump. "Things done. In business, in politics, even in families. And when you're part of something powerful, it's easy to go along, easy to look away, to believe it's just how the world works." Trump didn't move. No adjusting his tie, no sweeping hand gestures, just watching, jaw clenched, eyes sharp. "But I don't think that's leadership," the young man went on, his voice gaining weight. "True leadership is about having the courage to see things clearly, to be honest, with yourself and with others." Then quietly he reached into his jacket, his hands clasping the edges of the podium, his expression unreadable. The young man had pulled a simple folded note from his pocket, unfolded it with care, and said, "I was asked to speak today, and I thought about what really matters." His eyes scanned the paper briefly. "I won't get into specifics, not here, not now," he continued, glancing at the monument behind him. "This place deserves respect. This office deserves respect." He nodded toward the presidential seal, then turned back to Trump. "But I believe," he said firmly, "that if we want to move forward, truly move forward, it has to start with honesty. Not just the appearance of success, but the reality of integrity." He folded the paper and returned it to his pocket. No names, no accusations, just truth spoken plainly. Yet the weight of his words lingered in the air like a storm cloud. In that quiet act, he had done something powerful. He had challenged the moment, the narrative, and perhaps even the man beside him. And finally, Trump moved. He stepped forward and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. At first, it seemed like a gesture of support, but the tension in his posture hinted at something else: ownership, control. "Very interesting words," Trump said, his voice booming as usual but with an unusual edge. He glanced at the crowd, forcing a smile. "Important things to think about. This is what I mean about the younger generation." With that, he gently but firmly steered the young man away from the microphone. The moment ended, and the planned program resumed, but the energy in the room had changed forever. The polite applause felt hollow, a mere formality after something real and unexpected. As the event went on, people whispered, eyes shifting between Trump and the young man, now seated off to the side with an unreadable expression. Reporters began filing their stories, headlines forming in real time. Unexpected challenge, truth in the spotlight, young voice questions power. The day wrapped up with handshakes and photo ops, but beneath the surface, a shift had begun. The young man's quiet but powerful words had cut through the noise, setting something in motion. The carefully crafted image and rehearsed performance had been pierced by something real and fundamental. Away from the cameras and crowds, the young man walked with a small group, still quiet and maybe a bit shaken, but also lighter, freed from the burden of expectation and silence. Inside, Donald Trump spoke with his advisors, his usual public smile gone. Frustration, irritation, and even surprise flickered across his face. The young man, once likely seen as a mere prop in a controlled show, had become something unexpected, a voice of truth. The news cycle exploded. Clips of the young man's words, the tense atmosphere, and Trump's reaction spread everywhere. Social media buzzed with opinions. Trump's supporters argued whether the young man was brave or misguided, while critics praised his courage, seeing a symbol of resistance. Beyond politics, the moment struck a chord. Parents discussed honesty and courage with their kids. People shared the clip with messages like, "This is important," or "Listen to this, facing the truth." That simple phrase echoed in conversations across the country. For Donald Trump, the day was a sharp reminder. Not everything can be controlled. Sometimes the biggest challenges don't come from political rivals or legal fights, but from unexpected places, from voices once underestimated. His carefully crafted image and narrative were strong, yes, but not unbreakable. One quiet moment of honest truth, spoken with conviction, proved that, as for the young man, his life was forever changed. He hadn't sought fame just to speak what mattered. Standing before power, he spoke truth, becoming a symbol for many. His journey was only beginning, marked by that pivotal day when he faced not only the man before him but the truth inside himself. The story isn't over. The ripples still spread, sparking reflection, conversation, and maybe, just maybe, a bit more courage in the world. What do you think about this moment? Let us know in the comments below.